Welcome to Behind the Story with Naomi and Lisa, where we discover the story behind your favourite stories. My name's Lisa Renee. I'm from the Collaborative Press and also contemporary romance author.
I'm Naomi Craig, author of the historical novel Rahab's Courage. Today we had a great interview with Kathleen Denly. We're excited to share that with you. Had some great time learning about her historical research and all that she does for her books. But first, before we get into our pre-recorded interview, Lisa, what are you working on right now?
Okay, so it's summer holidays in Australia. So January, I'm not doing a lot. I've just been spending some time with family and making myself not do too much on work. But yeah, I have been doing a bits and pieces here and there and keeping up with my newsletters and that kind of stuff. Also helping another author with some of her books and things like that from the Collaborative Press. So yeah, just tugging along, and then I'm just plotting out my third book in the series. All the ideas are coming even when I'm on holidays. Little scenes are coming in my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that'll be great. So yeah, so this week I'll be just writing those ideas down and plotting out my story, because I like to do that before I get right into it. And February I'll be writing my book 3 in my rom-com series. What are you doing for January?
I'm still working on that Christmas anthology. I'm just trying to finish that up. My goal is to have that done by the end of January, at least. Not polished maybe, but to have it as a good solid story, and then move on from there. So it's interesting though, because like it's just how these people are so like, it's if you haven't seen other episodes, it's Christmas and castles and biblical fiction. So I went with King Herod's palace, and when this wise men show up, it's he consults the scribes and the priests to find out where the Messiah was supposed to be born. And so I'm doing it from the scribes' perspective, but it's really sad because Jerusalem to Bethlehem is like about 6 miles, and it doesn't say anything about anyone going to see the Messiah. Like, it's just really a heart check. Like, what would you do if the Messiah was 6 miles away? You know, would you put aside your life and go see him, or just ignore it? So yeah, I'm having fun with that, and I'm making progress.
Interesting. So are your critique partners going to get first preview of this?
I hope so.
Straight to celebrate list.
I hope so. You know, I need you guys.
Cool. All right, I'll be on to it. I'll be researching and reading my Bible. Cool. Well, that sounds really cool. So we enjoy this interview we got coming up, and because it was all in historical fiction, so Naomi was really loving it, and I've been reading her books as well. So our guest today is Kathleen Denly. She writes historical romance stories to entertain, encourage, and inspire readers toward a better understanding of our amazing God and how he sees us. Award-winning author of the Chaparral Hearts series, she also shares history tidbits, thoughts on writing, books, reviews, and more at her website, kathleendenly.com. We'll have the links in our show notes. Kathleen, thanks for joining us on Behind the Story.
Thanks for having me.
Kathleen, for those who aren't familiar with you, tell us about yourself and what you write.
So I write historical Christian romance, and I'm happily married. I actually just recently celebrated my 20th anniversary in December, so that was fun. And we got snow, so we got to go out and enjoy the snow on our anniversary. That was nice. It's a change for me because I'm from Southern California. We just moved to Central California, and we didn't have much snow where we were living before, so this was fun. I have 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. I'm a homeschooling mom, so feel like I kind of have 2 full-time jobs. And let's see, what else should I tell you? Oh, I have 1 dog and 9 cats.
Oh my goodness. Another cat lover. That's awesome. Yeah. I have had 9 cats at one stage, but they were kittens. We have ragdoll, male and female, and I love kittens, but yes, my husband's so easygoing, he probably would let me have 9 cats, but I don't think the council here would approve. See, obviously, if you've got some space, so you got a bit of land.
Yeah, we have a 5-bedroom house. We live on 20 acres. So 3 of our cats are outside in what we call a cat coop. used to be a chicken coop. We converted it to cats because the local rescue needed a place for their feral cats to go that had been trapped and neutered and spayed and just couldn't be returned to the place where they were, but they were too wild to be indoor pets. I don't know if you have any experience with feral cats, but they can be very, very natural. So they live very happily and peacefully outside, and the rest of my cats live in the house.
Right, cool. We've got a critique partner friend, and similar situation. She takes in these strays, and they end up becoming pets, so it's hard to resist them. Yeah, we sterilize our male, but the female I need to sterilize. I was trying to find her a mate, but she's on heat now. So if you hear some meowing in the back, we can't let her outside. So yeah. Awesome. Well, let's get on to this latest release, which is really exciting. I've started reading it and I'm absolutely loving it. So Harmony on the Horizon, released January. What sparked this particular book in the series?
Okay, so this particular book started when I took my kids on a field trip to Old Town San Diego State Historic Park. And during that tour, they brought us into the schoolhouse, which was built in 1865. And what I found out later is that the story they shared with us is actually one that they share regularly. So a lot of people who, if you go there, you'll probably hear it. They call it the Mary Walker Chase Scandal. And essentially, it gave me the framework for this story. It was about a woman who came from Massachusetts, went to San Francisco, thought she was getting a teacher's job there, wasn't any there when she got there, had to go down to San Diego. Being from the North, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Civil War dates, but this was right at the end of the Civil War. What a lot of people don't know is that San Diego was actually a Southern sympathizing city. A lot of Southern California was. I could go into all kinds of history on that, but I won't. But needless to say, a Northerner who has abolitionist ideologies gets into quite a bit of trouble in San Diego at that time, and kind of drags her hero down with her. So he gets put in a position where he has to decide if everything he's worked for his entire life, if he's willing to risk it for her. So.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, and that was all sparked except from for that last part. That was from the true story. So I got mixed up, sorry. So the true story involves the guy on the Board of Education. He ends up marrying the teacher, but he marries her several months after the initial scandal. The scandal causes the parents to demand her to be fired, basically. And there's this whole thing. And so I don't want to give too much more away because that's already a lot of detail.
Well, I guess if we go and tour in San Diego, we might get a little spoiler there. Huh?
Yeah, I do want to clarify that this is inspired by and not based on. My characters are not meant to represent the actual people. I used the historical people and the experience they went through as a framework for what my characters went through.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. So this is book 3, right? And the Chaparral Hearts.
This is book 3.
So can it be a standalone? Is it woven in together with the rest of the series?
Yes, I write all of my books so that they can be picked up and read as a standalone, and you will have a complete story. Awesome. However, I do want to warn you that if you read book 3 before you read book 2, before you read book 1, you're going to find out some things that happen to those characters in the previous books because they all make cameos. So like the hero and the heroine actually become friends with the heroine of the book 3. So book 2, hero and heroine become friends with book 3, hero and heroine, and they all have like family or business connections. So you miss out on the little author reader winks if you don't read the order.
So, I mean, it's all musical themed. You've got Harmony on the Horizon, and now I'm blanking on all the others, but it's lovely. Okay. What are your titles?
It began with Waltz in the Wilderness, and then it was Sing in the Sunlight, and then Harmony on the Horizon. And that actually was not intended. It just worked out like that.
So is there a musical theme that goes along with it as well?
All of the titles are connected to the theme of the novels. So for an example, in Waltz in the Wilderness, my heroine Eliza needs to learn to be guided. When you're learning how to waltz, the male leads. Mm-hmm. And so I think of waltzing as sort of like allowing ourselves to be guided by God and trusting in him instead of trying to lead the way. And then there's the wilderness metaphor, which, I think you could probably figure out. But yeah, there's that. And then there's the same similar kind of a thing in Sing in the Sunlight, as well as in Harmony on the Horizon. So, but the interesting thing to note is that the next 3 books don't have that musical continuation.
So it's a continuation of the Chaparral Hearts?
Yeah, I'm writing
Awesome.
3 more full-length novels, and I'm currently working on a novella for it, the same series.
Wonderful. Awesome.
Well, that's great. With the story titles, because it's interesting, and then there's usually a spot in the novel where people are like, oh, that's why it's called that. Do you have that moment where
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah. As a reader, I always look for those and I really enjoy them. And so as a writer, I have to put them in. And I've gotten feedback from readers on like when they've had that, oh, I had that moment, So
yeah. I worked it out. Cool.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it's just obvious. We've got a reader question. Holly B would like to know what your research looks like.
So it was a lot different for this one because of the pandemic. Normally what I do is I go and I visit all the historical locations and I visit historical archives. I really, really try to find primary sources for as much of my research as I can, meaning like actual diaries and letters and newspaper articles from the time. In this case, fortunately, I had done the majority of my research before the pandemic started, but I was not able to complete it as I normally would. Fortunately, God blessed me with really good relationships that I've developed with the archive people. And so even though the archives were officially closed, I was able to get a few of them to help me out.
Yay!
And they were able to go to the archive and do my research for me and email me what I needed. So that was very, very, such a blessing. I'm very grateful for their help.
So what inspired you to start writing historical fiction in the first place?
First of all, I had amazing history teachers growing up. I had teachers that brought history to life. I could tell you stories. One of my favorite ones to tell is that when I was in 8th grade, my history teacher, he was teaching us about the slave ships, and he wanted to give us a sense of how cramped the quarters were. And he made us, how they have those chairs that are connected to a desk? Mm-hmm. Well, he made us cram them all into one corner of the room so that we were all like boxed in, like we could not move out of our chair. And that was just something that stuck with me. And I loved that aspect of making history real. And for me, I could care less about the dates other than I make it accurate for my stories. But I'm not like, hey, you have to memorize this date. You have to know this big event or this important person's name. For me, my love of history comes from the details. How did the women on the pioneer trails deal with the bathroom in their monthlies? Like questions like that get me digging through letters and diaries and trying to find scraps of information. And fortunately, there's been a lot of historians that went before me and wrote books on these things. But like, okay, so I just found a new book that I bought today, which goes over the history of the cook stove, and not from the perspective of, okay, at this point it was invented, at this point it was popularly used, but a perspective of how it affected the daily life of the women who were using it. And that I'm like, sign me up. Mm-hmm. So I try to incorporate that kind of information into my stories. I try to show what life was like at the time as much as we can from this perspective.
Great. Do you use some visuals? Because it seems like there's a lot of visual cues and a lot of information, like detail in your stories, which is really makes you feel like you're in that era and that time, and the materials and that kind of stuff. Do you, they're just newspaper clippings? How do you get the visuals for these kind of things?
So it depends on what it is, but a lot of the times I can find really good descriptions. For example, in Sing in the Sunlight, I incorporate the only hurricane to ever strike California's coast. And fortunately, there were a lot of newspaper articles, firsthand accounts, which were preserved. And I was able to read really nitty gritty details, like things as detailed as ships were blown on shore. This specific house on this specific street lost its roof. You couldn't see so far because, I think it was like 10 feet or something like that. You couldn't see farther than 10 feet because there was so much sand being blown through the air and all kinds of details like that. And so I really try to take from those sources and convey that to my readers in a way that's entertaining. And I did a similar thing with Harmony on the Horizon, in that Margaret who is inspired by Mary Chase Walker. We see her first impressions of San Diego, and you might be surprised at what they are, because everybody these days thinks about San Diego as like this temperate, beautiful place to go and visit the beaches. And well, her first impression was, what am I doing here? This place is all brown. There's nobody here. It's this little hick town. And I took a lot of like the details from Mary Chase Walker's actual memoir. In fact, there's a specific mention of ox cart being pushed by a Mexican couple, and like there's the details around it, and I actually incorporated that into the story and made it so that it was a delivery being brought to my character. So it, I get a lot of details that way. Unfortunately, there are not very many photographs. There's no videos, obviously, because of the time period. The earliest photograph of San Diego that we know of is from 1867. So anything before that, I'm basing on sketches and maps and descriptions.
Wow, that sounds awesome. So for yourself in your spare time, other than historical fiction, what genre do you like to read, or do you just stick totally to historical fiction?
Well, I actually read a lot of the subgenres of Christian romance, of course, but a second to that would be Christian speculative fiction, actually. I really enjoy science fiction, dystopian fiction, and a little bit of fantasy as well. So in fact, some of my favorite authors are Kara Swanson and, oh, and now I'm going to blank on her last name, Lindsay. She wrote The Story Peddler.
The Story Peddler, yeah.
Yes, that series was amazing, wasn't it?
I didn't read it, but
you didn't? Oh, you have to read
I know
that.
Franklin? Is it Lindsay Franklin?
Yes, thank you, Lindsay Franklin. Yeah.
One of our critique partners, well, actually a couple of them do some fantasy and stuff, and one is indie published. It's with but it's a series. It's called the Whisperers series. Skylight Falls, Skylight Ends, Skylight Begins, something like that, by Donna E. Lane.
Oh, yeah. I have that first one on my Kindle waiting for me to get to it. Yeah.
Oh, it's like Narnia meets Left Behind. It's really fantastic. She did a great job.
I read that in a review or a quote or something, and that was kind of part of what hooked me in.
Maybe it was mine, because that's what
it must have been that. It must have been.
And then Tabitha Bolden is coming out with the Alice in Wonderland steampunk Frankenstein mashup here in March. So that's an excellent one too. Yeah.
That's funny, because you would think, being a historical fiction fan, that I would have read steampunk, and I haven't got around to it yet, especially because I like sci-fi and I like history. You'd be like, obviously she reads steampunk. Right. I've actually never read a steampunk novel.
Well,
I keep meaning to, and I haven't got to it yet. So maybe that'll be my first.
Yeah, it's a great one. So that's awesome. So how do you find your faith playing into your writing?
I feel like it just comes out naturally. It's just how I view the world. I just sort of view it through God's lens. For me, that's the entire purpose of life. And so to write like general market, although I could, it would feel like I was like handcuffing myself, because I wouldn't be able to directly talk about God. And my passion is really showing people's spiritual growth and how God works through other people in our lives to help bring us to where he wants us to be, so that we're happier and closer to him. I guess that's kind of how I look at it. I try really hard not to be preachy. That's one of the questions I ask every single beta reader. I'm like, okay, is this coming across preachy? Is this too much? Do I need to back it off? So far, I haven't gotten that critique in any of the reviews that I've seen. So hopefully that means I'm doing well. But yeah, that's kind of how I see my faith playing out in my stories.
That's great. So how long have you actually been writing? And if you've got any advice for any excited authors out there that want to start writing their first book, what advice would you give them before they start?
Yeah, that's always a tough question for me to answer, because I'm like, okay, when do I decide that I've started writing? I guess the easiest way to say it is that I started writing this genre in, I think it was 2002. And I didn't start taking my writing seriously, though, till about 2010. And that came about actually after I had some postpartum depression following my third pregnancy. And during therapy, realized that I was trying to put my writing on hold in order to be a mom. And it was like holding my breath. I was suffocating. new authors. Don't wait as long as I did to go to a writer's conference. I totally thought you have to have a finished manuscript before you go there. It's so expensive. And I mean, if you can't afford it, there are scholarships. Find a way, figure out something you can do to earn a few dimes and quarters and add them all up and get there, because I was shocked at how much I learned, not just from the workshops themselves, but just from having conversations with other writers. You learn about the industry, you learn about craft, you learn about, even if you go to the Christian writing conferences, you learn about God. I have had some of my closest moments to God at the services at these conferences. So yeah, definitely don't wait on that. That would be probably my biggest takeaway. If I could go back and do something over, that would be the one thing I did differently.
Have you done any traveling overseas? Is there a favorite country that you would, if you could visit or you visited before?
I've actually done quite a bit of overseas traveling. I haven't yet made it to Australia, although I really want to. That was like in my top three. If I had to pick places to go, my top three would be Ireland, Australia, and then France again, because I actually have been to France, but I loved it. I actually spent my 15th birthday on the Eiffel Tower, so that's a pretty big thing.
What is something surprising that people would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, actually, it kind of ties into the last question. I actually was planning to be a flight attendant. When I first started going to college, I was focusing on getting a degree in French and hospitality, so that I could advance quickly in the flight attendant echelon, because you start off doing little podink things like from one city to the neighboring city, commuter type flights, and then you kind of have to work your way up the seniority ladder. And I wanted to get to the transatlantic flight that would allow me to go from France to America and back and forth a bunch. But before I finished getting my degree I met my husband. And suddenly being away from home all the time didn't sound as glamorous. So I switched to a teaching focus, and I didn't end up finishing that because I had kids. And so now I teach them. So I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that about me, because I don't talk about it a lot. And these days I don't do a whole lot of traveling.
Do you have a favorite hobby or activity other than reading and writing?
I love crafting and hiking. Crafting these days mostly looks like Bible journaling as well as junk journaling. And I don't know if you know what that is. But in case anybody watching doesn't know what that is, the essential concept is that you take found items and use them sort of in a scrapbooky diary way. So for example, there are junk journals that are made out of business envelopes. You take all of those ugly business envelopes that come with the little plastic window, and you stack them all together and you sew them into what's called a signature, which makes it look kind of like a book, and you give it a cover, and then you add all the fun stuff. You get inks and paints and cutouts, and it depends on your style. Some people use modern magazines. I'm more of a vintage junk journaler, so I use things that make everything look old. I want it all to look old and like it's been kicked around on the ground and left in the attic for 10 years.
Fun. I've never heard of that. That's exciting.
Yeah, sounds cool. It's a cool.
Do you sell it afterwards, or do you actually journal in it, or
I journal in it. I am not as faithful a journaler as I want to. Every now and then I'll be like, okay, this is it. I'm gonna journal every day for the rest of the month, and I'll get like 5 days in, and then something happens, and next thing I know, it's 2 months later, and I haven't written a thing.
Yeah, it's like all New Year's resolutions, right?
Pretty much, yeah. That's why I just quit doing New Year's resolutions. Yeah. It just set myself up for failure.
So this might tie in a little bit too, but is there something fun or quirky that may or may not influence your writing besides the junk journaling and wanting to be a flight attendant?
Yeah, actually, I am very, very hands-on. I mentioned before that I like to visit the historical landmarks. Not only that, I will look for all the recipes and all the methods. So I've made my own lye soap. I've made tallow candles. I've learned how to do like mountain man type bushcraft things and practice them. I've washed my own laundry using an actual washboard, like anything I can figure out that my characters might be doing in the 19th century, especially if I know I want to incorporate it in a book, I'll try it. I've even done yucca fibers. I've taken a yucca leaf and broken it down to the fibers and woven it into rope and made a little bracelet out of it. They made shoes out of it, but I made a bracelet. I was pretty impressed with myself.
I bet you're really thankful for modern conveniences though, like air conditioning and
yes. Oh my goodness.
indoor
yes.
plumbing.
I actually wrote an entire blog post once on all the reasons I would die in the 19th century.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you appreciate when you're reading historical fiction. It's like what these women went through, and it really makes you appreciate how much where we've come from, and how we can communicate. So yeah, I've been really enjoying reading the series that you're writing. So the first 2 books are on Kindle Unlimited, and the third one, is that going to eventually go on to Kindle Unlimited, I assume?
That depends on what my publisher decides. And it depends on how sales go. I mean, she pretty much just follows the numbers. And if it makes more sense to move it over to Kindle Unlimited, then she does.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't really have any say over that.
Yeah.
Wild Heart Books.
Wild Heart Books, great. Okay, so your next work in progress, is that book 4? Have you already started writing that, or how's that going?
So I'm currently working on a new novella. So the Chaparral Hearts series actually consists of 4 books right now. There's the prequel novella, which is free to all of my newsletter subscribers. And then there's the 3 books that we've talked about already, which are full-length novels. And I'm actually working on a second novella, which chronologically takes place between book 1 and book 2. And it answers some questions about changes you see in a particular character between 1 and 2. And I've been thinking about doing it since I wrote book 2. So it's been a long time coming, and I'm very excited to be finally working on it, because I really feel like this is one that God wants me to write, like really have been pressing me to write it. And then after that, I'll be starting in on book 4, which it works out perfectly because we meet, trying to figure out the easiest way to explain this for somebody who's never read the books. So the villain of book 1 is the heroine of the novella that I'm working on right now. And she ends up adopting a girl who becomes the heroine of book 4. And you do get to see this heroine from book 4. You get to see her a little bit in Harmony on the Horizon, just for like a little quick second, before you'll meet her again in book 4. But the novella really will help set the tone and the background for why she is who she is. But again, I'll still give enough of everything in book 4 that you don't have to read the prequel, the other novella, if you don't want to. But I like to read everything, so. And I am planning to give this new novella away to my newsletter subscribers as well. So hopefully this fall,
you guys better sign up and get this first
Yeah.
free novella and the one coming out. That sounds cool. So when you say novella, because it's historical fiction and your books are longer, what's that? How many words is a novella?
Okay, so I think my prequel one, if I'm remembering right, it was so long ago that I wrote it. I want to say it was around, it's somewhere between 40 and 60,000. I don't remember exactly, honestly. I would just be making a number up if I tried to give you one. Yeah. But my new one, I'm aiming for around 45, but I think I might go over. Mm-hmm. So my full-length novels, though, are typically closer to 100,000. I think Waltz in the Wilderness was just under at like 97,000. And I think Sing in the Sunlight was like 110, and Harmony on the Horizon was somewhere around in there too.
That's like a full one of your full books there, Lisa. Her novella.
Yeah, that's right. My books are I'm writing shorter ones around 50,000.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a different
when you want to release them a bit quicker.
Yeah, it's a different expectation in the historical fiction world.
Yeah, definitely.
So where is it that people can sign up for these novellas? The one and then the one coming.
So the link is on my website, which is KathleenDenly.com. And the part people usually trip up on is my last name. So it's Denly.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining us on Behind the Story.
Thank you. It's been so fun talking to you guys.
Be sure to connect with Kathleen, sign up for her free novella. Actually, it could be considered a full-length book, so lots of good reading there. Follow her on socials and keep in touch with her as she continues her writing journey. And also, you'll find in the links, the show notes, you'll find other goodies as well. Kathleen is offering an e-copy of either Sing in the Sunlight or Waltz in the Wilderness. So be sure to join in this King Sumo to get entered into that. It looks like it'd be a fantastic series. You're not going to want to miss that. And we also have lots of goodies as well. If you're like into biblical historical fiction, I've got my novella on Desolate Heights. You can find that at my website, naomicraig.com. That is Balaam's story about him and his talking donkey.
Great. And if you like contemporary romance, I have a fun novella which is available on ebook or audiobook, Fake Engagement Mistake. And that's on my website, lisareneeauthor.com. And we'll have those links in our show notes. Don't forget to follow us. You can subscribe on our blog and you'll get automatically notified when we've got a new episode up, or we're on podcast if you like to do audio, or our YouTube channel. We've just created a new YouTube channel for Behind the Story, so don't forget to subscribe there as well.
And thank you so much for joining us today on this edition of Behind the Story. Until next time, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Thanks for joining us.